Good afternoon, and welcome to what I think is one of the most important conversations happening in marketing right now. We're going to talk not just about technology, but about transformation, and about how important it is to have a data foundation that's not only ready for what you need now, but is future-proof for where your business is going and where the market is heading. My name is Matt Pilgrim. I work at Snowflake. I lead our EMEA team for AdTech and MarTech, which we affectionately shorten to MadTech at Snowflake, which I think is kind of quite fitting given the amount of disruption that's happening in this space. But it's my job to look after some of our ISVs in the marketing space, help them work lockstep with Snowflake to deliver value to our customers. Oh yes, I was going to read this slide out for you. Sorry, no, don't need to do that. This needs to be in all of our presentations, but it's just a disclaimer. So let's start by looking at some of the challenges. And to be honest, I feel like as marketers, we're kind of facing what feels like a bit of a perfect storm. We can see lots of challenges at the moment in things like signal loss and privacy concerns, which means a lot of the more traditional methods which we would typically market are becoming more and more challenging. And in some instances almost obsolete. We're seeing some real fragmentation, or have seen fragmentation of ecosystems, meaning that it's really tough for us to have that consolidated view of what's happening across our customer base. And we've got the hanging of generative AI, the promise of generative AI kind of hanging over us at the moment, where I'm not sure we're fully realizing that potential, and I think a lot of that is down to sometimes not having the right data foundation in place. When you kind of couple these together with the speed at which the industry is innovating right now, so this is Gordon Moore, sorry, most commonly known for Moore's Law, right, which is the speed at which technology is able to progress based on the speed at which we can build some of the chips in place. So typically Moore's Law is 2 years, with double capacity every 2 years. Some of the LLMs now are actually moving at a much faster pace. Some of the LLMs are doubling roughly every 7 months. So we're looking at disruption and innovation happening at almost 3 times the speed of which we're used to. Right? So it's really challenging to keep up with that. And in fact, a Harvard professor named Ethan Mollick, Harvard professor in AI, he made a statement earlier in the year saying that actually if we stopped developing on AI right now, it would take us around 10 years to really see the full potential of where we already are. He revised that statement later this year to say it's more like 25 years. I just think let that set in for a minute. Where we are right now in terms of where AI is, it could take us up to 25 years to see the potential that's on offer there. It's quite astounding. Stuff is moving incredibly quickly. And add another layer to this. So the challenges that we see at an enterprise level. So governance is extremely important, right? And we're talking about trust, consumer trust. The stakes are incredibly high. And AI, again, at that kind of enterprise level, there's a lot of pressure for us to be AI ready. And I'm not sure for a while, and many of us really knew what that actually meant, right? We need to be AI ready. We need to be ready for AI. This pressure is real, but a lot of companies are struggling to adapt to that. And also kind of pressure at an org level to be open by design, right? So can we make sure that we're ready to adapt to some of the changes? Can we think about a kind of composable stack? And when you put all these together, it makes a really interesting challenge for the marketer. But at Snowflake, we feel like we've got quite a compelling argument to help you overcome some of these challenges. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I'm going to base a lot of what I talk about on a report that we release every year called the Modern Marketing Data Stack. Show of hands, how many of you have read the Modern Marketing Data Stack report? Okay, that's pretty good. There's some good hands going on. Those of you that haven't, don't worry. I'm going to summarize it for you today. Just to give you a bit of background, so this report that we released, we're on the 4th iteration, the 4th year of us running this report. It's a really good read, and I would say that working for Snowflake, but I can highly recommend it. It gives you a great insight into kind of where the market's leading. But what I find unique about this is it's data-driven, right? So we pull on information that we have on our around 12,000 customers, the partners that we're working with, and we're able to see how they're using our technology, other technology, the projects they're running. It gives us a really good sense check of where we feel the market's leading, and there's some great insights in here. In the report, we feature around 93 partners, both of which are two of which I have present here today, I'm pleased to say. But it covers cloud service providers, data cloud partners, data cloud product partners, services partners, LLMs. It's got a really good cross-section. And this year we've gone a step further and included some more practical advice. So we've got some thought leadership and commentary from people like Accenture, Deloitte, and some of the thought leaders in the industry like TMW and Scott Brinker. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, I thought I'd put in a little QR code here. If you want it, you can download it. It's free to read. If you want to look at some of the more detail that I'm going to cover today, please do take a quick snap and go download it. I'm also getting all my credits out of the way up front, okay? So I'm also going to talk a little bit on some of the findings from this report here as well, the State of MarTech, something produced by Scott Brinker and the team. Another great report. But when you kind of combine some of the findings in here, I think it paints a really nice picture of kind of the weight behind the importance of having this data-ready foundation, future-ready data foundation. Okay, so let's start with some of the findings of this report. So really, fundamentally, we see three key forces really shaping what's happening in marketing and the broader market. They're interconnected, and they're kind of helping shape what we see some of the other trends happening in this space. For the sake of this presentation, I'm going to call them mega trends. If I'm honest with you, mainly because I was trying to avoid the temptation to throw in loads of Star Wars imagery when we start thinking about the Force this, the Force that. So I've decided to spare you from that, and I'm just going to use the term mega trends. But they are AI, data gravity, and privacy. And we're going to look at each of those in turn and kind of give you an indication of why it adds so much weight to this requirement of needing this data foundation. So megatrend one is AI, and unless you've been hiding under a rock, it's everywhere, right? It's permeated everywhere. I love this stat from McKinsey saying that 75% of the generative AI annual economic value is concentrated in three key business areas. First one being customer operations, second one being software development, and the last one being sales and marketing. The last actually making up the lion's share of what we see as $1 trillion opportunity. So what does this tell us? Well, I think it tells us that marketing, by focusing our efforts on marketing use cases within AI, we've got a really good chance of addressing one of the largest addressable markets within AI. So you could argue that winning in marketing, you're one step to winning within AI. Some other nice stats from the State of MarTech report. So 87% of marketers are now using AI assistants in their daily work. This report was put together at the start of the year. I don't know about you, but this kind of makes me wonder what the other 13% are doing, right? Because I think now you'd say that's got to be nearer 100%. And 60% of organizations are running custom AI applications directly on their data layer. So I think you can see that AI is absolutely permeating everything that we do within marketing. And to put a bit more meat behind that, so the report also helped us have an idea of kind of where we see the kind of main areas of marketing AI impact. This slide is a little bit wordy, so I'm going to try and summarize it for you, okay? But the first key area that we see AI having a massive impact within marketing is on data management. And we sort of talked about this a little bit before, but AI is just making it so much easier for us to be able to ingest data, doing a lot of that kind of foundational work with things like classifying and standardization, meaning that we don't have to do so much of this manually and speeding up giving you more time to spend on other areas of data management. No surprises, we're seeing a huge impact across content and creative. Some of the big vendors like Getty Images and Shutterstock are offering Gen AI tools now that allow you to create imagery on the fly, custom images that you can use. And actually some of the LLMs are getting really good. So Claude for me, I think is pretty decent in terms of how it's able to understand your tone of voice and help you with some of that creative writing. Decisioning, so as you'd expect from this talk, AI decisioning is a big theme and something that's really starting to help marketers. So, tools now that are able to help with some of the predictive analytics and kind of journey orchestration and kind of giving information back to marketers now in kind of natural language. And the last one, measurement. And this is an interesting one for me. Marketing mix modeling is back. I don't know if that's going to get a cheer or a jeer. I'm not sure. But it's interesting because MMM is not a new concept. It's been around for a while, but it's something that I don't want to say it died a death because that's not true, but it kind of fell off a little bit as we started to see more channels, the complexity, the data available. It became quite hard to have that kind of single view of how your marketing efforts are performing. But AI has really helped to see a resurgence of MMM, being able to process lots of different data sets simultaneously using LLMs and using ML, and also helping us to give responses back to marketers in natural language, making it much easier for us to kind of interact with some of that data and insights. So, the last slides and the stats, what's it kind of telling us? Well, I think it's clear that AI has really moved on from proof of concepts. It's in everything now, right? So the question really isn't around if it's going to drive material impact. It's kind of like how AI is going to drive that material impact for you. Something I found quite interesting about the report as well, it kind of pulled up this game changer for us this year, which has been the natural language interface. So if you're familiar with Snowflake, we have something called Snowflake Intelligence, which is a great proponent of this. But the ability for marketers to now really talk to their data, right? To ask real-world questions of your data and get real-world answer back. Sometimes, suggested next best actions. And this has already been, a lot of the power that sits within AI has really started to come to the fore because of the advancements of natural language interfaces. So if this is kind of what we're seeing, where we see AI coming from and where it is now, like what do we think we're going to see next? Well, our report very clearly states that we're likely to see, a lot of customers now moving from this single agent to multi-agent use. We've seen a real rise in MCP use, which is that protocol which agents use to communicate with tools and applications. And this kind of agent-to-agent agentic collaboration is really starting to take off. So what are we going to see next? If this year we've heard a lot about agentic, I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been to a lot of talks where people are talking about agentic. I'm not sure we've really seen enough advancement in that space, but our report and what we hear from our customers is next year and sort of beyond, we're really going to see agentic as being that next wave. And one of the huge values that brings is being able to unlock a lot of the unstructured data that we see in organizations. If you have that central point, that future-ready data foundation, you're kind of ready to really take advantage of some of this. And it's not just us saying it. We had a nice quote from Sam Altman from OpenAI, our summit this year, talking about the importance of agentic, saying how he really feels this is going to start to surpass anything that we are even thinking about doing right now within marketing. So it's exciting times. But all of this can't be possible without a solid and future-ready data foundation, which kind of moves us on to this next trend or mega trend, I'm not saying force yet, which is data gravity. Now obviously, this is kind of just a play on words, right? Much in the planet, as the same way as in the planetary sense, objects of a greater mass attract those of a lesser mass. We see the same thing in data as well, with the larger sets of data attracting other sets of data and sometimes applications to where they live. And this is a really powerful megatrend that we're seeing, and one that's influencing a lot of other things that we see in the market. But it's the key point to remember, it's this idea of bringing your applications to your data, not the other way around. Really minimizing the risk in having to copy data, move it around, reduce complexity. And data gravity, for me, is really one of the driving forces behind really what we see in composable now, the idea of best-of-breed stacks on a single data source. And that's quite interesting as well for me, because this isn't really a new concept, right? The idea of composable, best-of-breed. I think this is something that many of us have bought into for a while now. If you think of the Mac Alliance, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Mac Alliance, but a lot of marketers really put weight onto the concept behind that. I personally am a fan as well. But when you break it down of what sort of we're talking about with Mac, it's actually really hard to do, right? Even just the first two letters, microservices, API-driven, it kind of talks about the fact that data is being shared, and we're trying to keep one version of that data, but it's sharing across those different interchangeable platforms. It's really, really hard to do. But if you think about the data being in one central point and everything coming to where that data lives, all of a sudden, the idea of a fully composable architecture becomes much more feasible and much more appealing. And I think that's pretty exciting, because I think it's a concept that we all buy into, but one we weren't necessarily able to take advantage of. So I'll try and give you a couple of other examples of where we see data gravity in action. This is some of the other stuff that's been kicked out from our report. So let's look at kind of the evolution of CDP, and we'll touch a little bit on AI decisioning. So CDPs, customer data platforms, they've been around for a while. I think for a long time they were actually a bit of an unsung hero, a big proponent of this idea of centralizing your customer data in one place. And last year, 2024, was kind of their moment in the sun, right? We saw Gartner finally release their Magic Quadrant for customer data platforms. Forrester did a B2C wave. Fantastic. But it also coincided, unfortunately, with a bit of a transformation happening in that CDP space. A lot of those platforms were starting to kind of rethink their purpose. Why, and organizations, I think, were starting to question why they would move all of their most valuable asset, the customer data, into a third-party platform. So we were trying to kind of pull it back, this idea of data gravity again. So we started to see CDPs really moving away from this idea of ingestion and storage to kind of becoming composable CDPs, right? This idea of orchestration layers on top of that existing data layer. And I think this is really where we see this space going now. And it's driving the rise of things like AI-powered decisioning across lots of channels. And I'm not going to talk too much about this because you've got some masterclass coming up later, I'm sure, from Lindsay. But if you want to kind of know a bit more about AI decisioning, I'm not just saying this, go take a look at the Hightouch website. They've got some really great content on there and actually some really good examples of how they use it. I don't work there, no plug, it's just an honest answer. But AI decisioning is becoming so important, and like data gravity is really one of those main drivers for making this possible, right? Having all that data centrally stored. You saw from the previous presentation how it needs to pull on that central repository of customer data. It's really making things like AI decisioning possible. And it becomes extremely powerful when we start to think about one-to-one personalization, hyper-personalization, personalization at scale, whatever term you want to use. And as mentioned in the previous presentation as well, this is stuff that we talked about for a long time, but haven't really been able to fully take advantage of. And I feel like these two forces coming together, the advent of AI, data gravity, is really getting to the point where we can start to really see the value and unlock the value in some of these strategies. And when we start thinking about personalization, hyper-personalization, that sort of leads us on to the third mega trend, which is privacy. Not the most exciting topic for some of us, right? But it's extremely important. And when you think about how you engage in a personalized journey, you have to think about how we manage privacy and consent. And this is something that's becoming more and more prevalent. So we see about 77% of people not trusting social media right now. And about 70% of people aren't trusting AI companies. So trust is at an all-time low, right? Even though it's one of the biggest commodities that we should be thinking of in marketing. So how do we go about changing this in this really what is a really challenging landscape? And one of the reasons, that it's so difficult for us to get this right, privacy regulations are continuing to evolve. And I've just listed a few out here, but you think about the California Delete Act, which is coming next year, where it's going to be a central system for data deletion requests. I think we're likely to see more systems like this appearing. GDPR, which has for a long time been kind of the gold standard. We're seeing deregulation pressures now applying, so this is likely to adjust and change again. So it's getting more complicated. And third-party cookies. For a while, I think we thought we were all facing a bit of a privacy apocalypse, but Google gave us a last-minute reprieve. But still, these challenges are real, and they're ever-evolving and are ever-changing, and are going to get more complicated. So being able to adapt and deliver the solutions that we want to deliver and the experiences you want to deliver while still maintaining privacy and governance is harder and harder, and it's even harder to do without that kind of central data foundation. And I don't think there's ever been a time when this is more true, right? First-party data is becoming more and more precious. Regulatory constraints are beginning to grow and evolve. So the need to have things like consent and anonymization, compliance, transparency, these things built into that future-ready data foundation is an absolute must-have, right? Privacy isn't a bolt-on anymore. It's a fundamental design constraint, and we really need to be thinking about this from that core foundation up. So 3 mega trends. I'm going to start calling them forces again. I'll go back to how we reference it in the report. But they are absolutely interconnected, right? And that's why I think they are mega trends, because they don't work in isolation. They're affecting one another. influencing how the market is changing and how each are changing in turn. And you can see some obvious overlap here, but for me, the one that stands out is really data gravity, right? Without that kind of central data store, your AI strategy becomes much harder to implement. Without that central data store, things like governance and compliance are much harder to manage. They obviously affect one another, but for me, that really stands out. And what ties them all together? Well, it's almost impossible to have a clear strategy around AI, data gravity, or privacy without having a future-ready data foundation. And this is where we at Snowflake feel like we have a really strong message to play. And we think that Snowflake is a great option to think of when you're looking at that future-ready data foundation. And look, I've got a good 20 slides in or so, and I haven't put a sales slide up yet, so you're going to have to give me this one, okay? So the last slide from me, but I think it's a really important one, right? So the Snowflake AI Data Cloud, it really is that future-ready data foundation for organizations to build upon. It's where we see things like AI, data gravity, central data stores, privacy. You can't get those right without this foundation. And Snowflake has a great story to tell in this space. But something I think is also really important to mention is that when we talk about the Snowflake AI Data Cloud, we are talking about our platform. We are talking about all those things that we can do that I've mentioned on the previous slides. But we're also talking about this ecosystem of partners. The AI Data Cloud is really nothing without our ecosystem, right? It goes lockstep together. And we've got some great examples in the report as well of partners that are building applications inside Snowflake on top of that platform to really help deliver this message for customers. So please, go take a look at that report and understand how that works in lockstep. And I hope that kind of leads into the next phase of these presentations. So if you can think of Snowflake as that future-ready data foundation, the AI Data Cloud, in collaboration with our partners, helping you to deliver on some of the opportunities that are in front of us now as marketers. You're going to hear more from CACI, from Hightouch, who are both partners here and part of that Snowflake AI Data Cloud in terms of how we move on and do that. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll be on the panel later.